Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Moog. Hello, all you weirdos listening to the Weird News Podcast. I am also a weirdo, and together we'll be weirdos together. So, welcome. We are going to go on a journey today, so join me on this fun journey about weird news. I'm going to be talking about Women's History Month. I'm going to be talking about Florida Man. I'm going to do a little fun thing called Let Me Google That For You, where I'm just going to Google some stuff, and we're going to go on that journey together, because why not? And maybe one of my favorite parts is we're going to be playing Tic-Tac-Toe, where I share with you some interesting TikTok stories, and we can discuss together. But let's talk about our week. How was your week, everybody? Mine was pretty decent. I did almost get my dog stolen. That's scary. I was in the laundry room. He was in the laundry room. Suddenly, he wasn't in the laundry room. And then suddenly, magically, one of my friends was walking in my neighborhood and saw two women with a really cute dog who looked just like my dog. And my friend had the instinct to say, is that your dog? And they said, no. And then she was like, give me that dog, please. And they're like, no, this isn't your dog. And so she actually was able to pull out her phone and show them pictures of my dog in her camera roll. And then they gave her my dog, which is crazy. This is real life. This is my real life that this happened. Literally, my dog was almost stolen. Thankfully, magically, my friend was standing in front of these women. She walked around the corner and bumped into these women holding this dog and was able to get my dog back through the proof of having photos on her camera roll. Wow. What a crazy story. And I had no idea this was going on. I was just in my laundry room doing my laundry. It's in the basement, and the door was cracked. So he just ran out. I didn't notice. I was, knee deep in laundry. It's very distracting. It's very distracting doing laundry. You have to separate those delicates from those regulars, those lights from those darks. I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot to pay attention to. So, I was almost dogless last night. This was last night, by the way. Anyone almost get their dog abducted? Anyone while doing laundry? Just me? So that happened. The stimulus passed this week. That's pretty cool. And hopefully all of you will be getting that, cashing those checks. Dollar bills. Get that money. You deserve it. All right. Another really important thing worth mentioning in my personal life is I discovered extra toasty Cheez-Its, and my life has changed. They are just literally that. Cheez-Its, toasted longer than regular Cheez-Its. So they are a little darker, a little browner, a little toasty, and the difference in flavor is remarkable. I don't know if I accidentally just sold like 1 million boxes of Cheez-Its. This is not a paid advertisement. This is just a little story about my personal life. So this could go one of two ways. The head of Cheez-Its contacts me and says, you're the one. You're our spokesperson. You're it. We found you. The other way it could go is I get reprimanded for even mentioning Cheez-Its. Then I shamefully become a hermit who never comes out to society again out of deep shame over what I've done. We'll see. Only time will tell which way it will go. Remember, we're all weirdos here. Remember that. Never forget. So today is very cold in Chicago, but we were lucky enough that for the past almost week, it was unseasonably warm in Chicago. And we got to hike and bike and swim. No, we did not swim. But I had actual, real outdoor time over the weekend with friends, socially distanced. My dog got one of his favorite things, which is a bike ride, either in the backpack or to run alongside the bike. He'll take either one. He's a little tiny 9-pound chihuahua, but he will zoom along the bike with me like a champ. I don't let him go too far because I don't want to hurt his little feet or, have him overdo it. So yeah, we got a lot of outdoor time for the first time in months in Chicago. And if anybody knows anything about Chicago, it's winter 8 months in the year here. It's really special. I feel like we're, one step away from like being in Siberia. There are cultures, entire cultures that plan and build and develop and strategize their whole lives around snow, to the point where they need snow to even live their lives. I spent some time at a farm in Norway, and in order to even get around, they have all these sled dogs, and when it's warm weather, like they kind of can't really live their life quite the same way. I found out from that experience that sled dogs during non-snow season, during no snow season, they have the same kind of sled, but on little wheels, like on little skateboard wheels or whatever the wheels are. And so they can still drive their sled around. But in that case, they only do that mainly for practice. They don't do it for like the real, we're actually going somewhere and having a real mush. What is it called? Sled dogging, mushing. But sled dogs have given us more than just the term mushing. My dog uses a product called Musher's Secret. Yeah, he just goes and buys himself this product, and he uses it himself. My dog uses this product. I'm not selling a product, but it was invented for sled dogs, and it's essentially a wax for the bottom of their paws. So when they're going out in the winter, and there's salt and ice and snow, you apply this wax to the bottom of their feet, and they can walk through snow and ice kind of like they're wearing shoes. And there is a noticeable difference when my dog is wearing it and when he's not. The typical, like, pulling up the feet and crying and hurting his toes when he doesn't have it, and walking like a champ when he does. So these are my facts about sled dogs and mushing and Musher's Secret. And apparently it is a secret because I had never heard of it, and I'm not a spring chicken, and I had never heard of this. And I've been working with dogs, and I've had dogs for years and years, and I had never heard of it. So yes, it is quite the secret, Musher's Secret. But I recommend it if you have a dog with sensitive paws, and it's wintertime, and it's salty. So thank you, Mushers, for this bounty of dog paw remedy. Thank you so much. So those are a few things that happened to me this week. What happened to you this week? Anything good? All right. So let's get us started off. Let's start with some tic-tac-toe. Now I'm going to go and play you a TikTok. Let's go.
So back in the 970s, during the Viking Age, there was a king of Denmark named Harald. He was often cited as crediting himself for uniting Denmark and Norway under one kingdom. Now, Harald had a bit of a dentistry problem in the form of a discolored tooth, which was kind of a bluish-black color, earning him the nickname Harald Blaton. Now we're going to fast forward 1,000 years. A man named Jim Kardak is sitting in his living room in the late 1990s reading a book on Vikings when he comes across information on Harald. Now, Jim is an engineer at Intel at the time, and has decided that Harald is the perfect symbol to represent his new unifying technology that he is developing. In Jim's version of the book, Harald's name Blaton is translated as Bluetooth. Harald's initials in younger Futhark runes are H and B. Put them together and what have you got? Bippity-boppity Bluetooth.
Okay, so thank you, sir. Who is this? It was Runemeister Chris. That is the handle on TikTok. Thank you. I love it. You couldn't see it, but the symbols H and B together are the Bluetooth symbol that we know and love. What a great story. I love TikTok. I love it because I have learned more from TikTok in the few months I've been on it than from my therapist, from my schooling years, from reading articles. It's a fascinating platform, and I love it. Those millennials, they know what they're doing. I think it's actually Generation Z, maybe, who's in charge of it now. Is that right? Am I making this up? Generation Z is the youngest generation, right? And I don't know, man. They do a fantastic job of making that a fun platform, I have to say. So the Viking with the discolored tooth, somehow some guy who was making some technology got inspired by this gentleman and named a electronic information sending technology after a random Viking. Why not? Why not? Haven't we all named something after a random Viking? Admit it, you have. So let's move on. Let's find another fun one. Who's ready? Oh, how about this one?
In summer 2010, the beekeepers of Brooklyn were very alarmed when their bees started glowing red and the honey was red too. They sent samples to the New York State apiculturist who said, "This is red dye number 40. Your bees have been dyeing themselves." Where were bees getting access to red dye number 40? The maraschino cherry factory in Red Hook. It was a very hot summer, so the bees were drinking the maraschino juice as nectar. This put a lot of focus on the maraschino cherry factory. In 2015, the EPA went to the cherry factory to investigate some wastewater disposal, and the owner, Arthur Mandela, said, "Excuse me, I must go to the bathroom." Well, he went to the bathroom and then he shot himself and he died. The EPA found a false wall, pushed through it, and there was a huge marijuana growing operation happening in the basement. The bees don't drink the nectar anymore.
Okay. Wow. So, a little inside information on that one. I commented on that a couple weeks ago, and my comment got like 30,000 likes. It's my first and only comment who has gotten more than, 1, 2 likes. And all I said was, let me find what I said. I said,
2010, the beekeepers...
All right. I said, how did these sequence of events affect the bees from drinking any more cherry juice? Because maybe you were listening and maybe it was confusing, but essentially they found red bees. And the authorities looked into the red bees. Why are these bees red? Oh, because they're drinking cherry juice. Well, let's go talk to the factory owner about the situation. Probably the bees should not be drinking the cherry juice because the cherry juice was being disposed of improperly. They go talk to the owner, and for no reason but a reason people don't understand, he ends his life. He's done. And they found out that he was just a huge drug dealer. And I think the cherry factory, as much as it was absolutely a functioning cherry factory, it was a front for his drug dealing. And he was so afraid of the consequence, he just ended it. Now, how did the bees get red from the cherry juice? And so my confusion with this story is, what does the marijuana have to do with the cherry juice? Well, the answer is nothing. At first I thought maybe the bees are going there to what is it called? Pollinate the marijuana. Maybe that's why, but I think it's just completely unrelated. The bees told on him. Ooh, they are tattletales. Like, if you just don't trust a bee, then you're right. Do not trust a bee, because they'll get you caught out and the EPA will show up at your door and you're going to be in trouble. So don't trust a bee. You heard it from me first, okay? I love this story. I do not love that part, but the cherry factory is still in use today. His daughters are still running that factory. So Um, what a crazy story. And I mean, maybe during that time you go to jail for a long time over selling massive amounts of marijuana. And I guess the prospect of going to jail and not living his cherry juice life was too much for him. I can't imagine. I've never been in that situation. I've never been caught out by a bee. So one of the comments says bees equals snitches. Yeah, exactly. So that was a great story, a tragic story. But, you know, it got me 30,000 likes. And all I asked was, how does this sequence of events end up with, how does it all connect? So, all right, we're going to move on to my final TikTok that I've chosen for us today. If I can only find it. Okay. Oh, groovy, I found it. Okay. So this one is a little teaser into what we're going to be talking about a little later with International Women's Day. And I love this hilarious woman, her take. Let's hear it.
It was International Women's Day on Monday, which, as a lady, I have to say, wow, a whole day and a Monday on top of that. Stop. You're spoiling us. It was
All right. So that is the username is Broadway Barbara Official. And I love it. And it makes a great point. We do have a whole day on a Monday because, women are one day important. Thank you. Thank you, whoever did that. But it does bring me to one thing I also want to do, which is let me Google that for you. And I'll give you a little spoiler right now about let me Google that for you. So let's talk to Google about International Women's Day. Okay, let's bring Google over here. Hi. Hey, Google, tell me about International Women's Day.
According to Wikipedia, International Women's Day is a global holiday celebrated annually on March 8th to commemorate the cultural, political, and socio-economic achievements of women. It is also a focal point in the women's rights movement, bringing attention to issues such as gender equality, reproductive rights, and violence against women.
Great. And apparently we only need one day to address that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Google. You are excused. So that's just a little teaser. We're going to be talking about International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Not the same thing, but they are in the same month, so obviously they're related, so that's pretty cool. So we'll be talking about that later. I also have some fun things for you, a little ASMR. Why not? I may or may not be eating a cracker just for you guys. Stick around. You don't want to miss that. You do not want to miss that.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. We were just talking about some fun TikToks, what has happened this week. So let's talk about International Women's Month. I believe it was International Women's Day this past week, but apparently in addition to the one day on a Monday, we also get a whole month. I say we because I am a woman. I'm Moog, and I'm a woman. And I want to start talking about Billie Holiday and some interesting facts about her. There is a movie that just came out starring Andra Day about Billie Holiday, and I think it's going to be a good one. Yeah. Billie did so much and suffered so much. But let's talk about some interesting facts. She gave herself the name Billy after a silent movie star, and that star was Billy Dove. Also, not surprisingly, Louis Armstrong was one of her earliest influences, and as a child she took a job doing chores and running errands for a local madam in exchange for a chance to play records on the madam's Victrola. I actually heard a lot more was going on in reference to this madam than just doing errands. I've heard a lot of unsavory stories about what Billy had to experience during her childhood. So it's interesting that when you look up these facts, it's largely watered down, I believe. Interesting. But let's just keep giving Billie Holiday that good name, and let's just say she was running errands because that feels right. All right, and then the fun part about that, her earliest influence, Louis Armstrong, is that as an adult, she got to star in a movie with him called New Orleans, and I love it. I love it when your dreams come to fruition like that. That's so great. All right, and moving on. Next fact about Billie Holiday, she only had one major chart success, Lover Man and Where Can You Be, which is just unbelievable to think about because even I have CDs. I've aged myself. I had CDs by Billie Holiday growing up, and she has such an amazing catalog, discography. It's unbelievable to me that only one was a major chart success, but it could just be a reflection of that time where maybe at that time it was such a controversial thing to like Billie Holiday, perhaps, and now with hindsight being 2020, we can recognize her for the talent she is. And this is a guess. I am making that up. That might be why at the time she didn't have any other major chart successes, but now people consider her incredibly successful, talented, amazing. So, moving on. She got the nickname Lady Day from a saxophonist, Lester Young. Also, Strange Fruit was one of her biggest and most controversial hits. I think a lot of people are familiar with that song. And the upcoming film about Billie Holiday, starring Andra Day, does hugely touch on this topic. I think it's mostly about this topic in addition to the rest of her fascinating life. So the song lyrics actually came from a poem written by a teacher and social activist, I believe a white male, and he was inspired to write it after seeing a photograph of a lynching. The image is so deeply disturbing that he actually penned the poem in protest of racial violence, which is interesting because the result was people protesting the song. When it just, where's the disconnect on those two? It's so interesting. So he later set the poem to music, and the result obviously found its way to Holiday, and she started performing it all over New York. And her label at the time didn't want her to record the song because of its controversial subject matter, but she ended up releasing the song, and it went on to sell 1 million copies, which is a lot of copies in 1939 when it was released. Good for her. Moving on. Holiday's life inspired her art, so she wrote the lyrics for her much-beloved God Bless the Child after a fight with her mother about money. And I love/hate this one. The phrase "don't explain" in her song "Don't Explain" was what Holiday said to her first husband when he came home with lipstick on his collar. True story. And the final fact about Billie Holiday is she did wrestle with her addictions until the very end. And I heard a really sad story that instead of helping her in her battle with drugs, she was targeted, whereas other high-profile people with the same exact addiction were helped by law enforcement, and the only difference, I believe, was skin color between how she was treated and how others with the same exact condition were treated. So I said she was targeted, and she was targeted by a federal agent by the name of Harry Anslinger. Among his strategies was his belief that jazz music was a part of the problem. So the reason for his targeting this genre of music came down to his widely known bias. And he was regarded as an extreme racist in the 1920s. So imagine someone being extreme racist in the 1920s, how extreme that was. He would use racial slurs in official memos. Pretty extreme. So the controversial nature of Strange Fruit among the musicscape at the time gave him the excuse he needed to go after Holiday. Keep in mind, this was not a time period when there were political pop songs. And here's an excerpt from an article on this topic. Quote, "And to have an African-American woman standing in front of a white audience singing a song against white supremacy and its violence was viscerally shocking at that moment. Coupled with Holiday's known struggles with alcohol and drug addiction over the years, Anslinger became laser-focused on taking Holiday down." This is a one man's campaign against one woman. So Anslinger hired a man by the name of Jimmy Fletcher to investigate Holiday. She was based in Harlem, and he wanted his agent to blend in, so he found someone who was also based in Harlem and who could blend in. And Fletcher himself believed, quote, "You victimize yourself by becoming a junkie," quote. So he seemed like the right fit for the job. But Fletcher soon frequented Holiday's neighborhood and saw her drinking, doing cocaine, but Holiday noticed him around too and grew to like him. So although Fletcher did eventually have to raid her, they grew close and were even seen dancing together at Club Ebony. And from what I've read, they actually dated. They were actually involved, and he actually fell in love with her. But he had to do his job, and he had to raid her. Quote, "I have had so many close conversations with her about so many things. She was the type who would make anyone sympathetic because she was the loving type." That's a quote from Jimmy Fletcher. She did end up having to go to jail over the raid. She spent a year in a prison in West Virginia where she refused to sing a note, which I love because she's not there to entertain anybody. She's there doing hard time, and I assume she must have felt that it would be somewhat exploitative if she were to go and sing and be a big star in prison and giving everyone else a free show when really that wasn't her job to give everyone a free show, perhaps. So when she was released from federal prison, her license to perform at cabarets was revoked. So this queen played a sold-out show at Carnegie Hall where she performed 22 more times. I love that turn of events. She can't perform at cabaret, so she does a sold-out at Carnegie Hall. I want to liken that to having your license to drive a car revoked, so you just start driving a spaceship around town. Like, that's the level that she leveled up to. Nice, Billy. You know, I wanted to keep this light, but the more I've read about Holiday and the more fun facts I've read about Billie Holiday, it's not a light story, really. It's a heavy story, and Anslinger was not done with Holiday after she spent that initial year in jail, and he kept pursuing and pursuing and pursuing until he eventually planted drugs on her. He had someone plant drugs on her. And, quote, "It's pretty clear, I think, from reading the historical documents, that White, the gentleman in question, planted drugs on Billie Holiday. She's broken and destroyed again. She's really back on the path of addiction." Quote. So that's the sad story. She was sober for more than a year. And Anslinger hired a gentleman to basically plant drugs on her. She had been sober for a year. And this gentleman, Colonel White, he broke into her hotel and said he found opium in a wastebasket and heroin in the room. But it's pretty clear that he planted these drugs on Billie Holiday. Because of this, she ended up having to go back to prison, and she relapsed. She'd go through a remission only to be addicted again, and her career spiraled because of it. But she kept performing through the 1950s, and she kept singing Strange Fruit, and she had so much courage. She'd risk her career and her life and her freedom because she felt she had to sing that song. And of course, Anslinger continued to pursue her, and Holiday collapsed and was sent to the hospital one day. And she feared Anslinger wasn't done with her and that he was going to do something to her. And she was so ill, and she was going to go through withdrawal, heroin withdrawal, because she was not given any at the hospital. And her friend, Maylie Duffy, managed to insist that she was given methadone so that she wouldn't go into withdrawal and die. And she was given methadone, and she began to recover. But obviously, heroin withdrawal is super dangerous. And if you're extremely physically weak, as she was, you have to be weaned off of heroin or you die. But then her worst nightmare came true, and Anslinger's team arrested her at the hospital, in the hospital bed. It was sort of like the last straw to the public that he could do this to her. And he really took the heart out of her. And after 10 days, he got them to cut off the methadone under his instruction. And she was so sick. And she was not well enough to undergo this kind of withdrawal. And she died. So her worst nightmare did come true. He was not done with her. He kept pursuing her until he finally was able to intervene with medical instructions. He had enough clout to actually intervene with her course of care. And she died as a result. So he succeeded in his decades-long pursuit to take her down. And if we are talking about Women's Month on the topic, we have to recognize that this pursuit was indeed fueled by racism. 100%. Because as I said before, other high-profile white people with the same exact issues she was going through did not receive this treatment and actually received help. Facts are facts. I'd like to think we live in a time where people can't go to jail for singing a song, but I don't know if we actually do, because famously, NWA sang a song where the lyrics F the police were in it, and they got arrested several times for singing that song. And that might have been in the 90s, and we are not in the 90s anymore, but I just don't know if I can confidently say people are no longer getting arrested because of singing songs. I think they might still be. Because this is America. That's a Childish Gambino reference. I probably sounded exactly like him, so I probably didn't even need to tell you that. Any Childish Gambino fans out there? Of course you are. Now let's talk about another person in history, another woman in history. But actually, this person is not a woman. It is a girl. Greta Thunberg, and I believe the name is probably pronounced more like Greta Thunberg, but I'm going to say Greta Thunberg. So let's talk about Greta Thunberg. She's an incredibly impactful environmental activist. And I love some of her quotes. Let's talk about her thoughts on harassment. Quote, "When haters go after your looks and differences, it means they have nowhere left to go. And then you know you're winning." On change. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. And I love this one about purpose. Quote, "I'm not that special. I can't convince everyone. I'm just going to do what I want to do and what will have the most impact." On changing the rules. Quote, "We can't save the world by playing the rules because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change, and it has to start today." On telling the truth. Quote, "I often talk to people who say, no, we have to be hopeful and to inspire each other. And we can't tell people too many negative things, but no, we have to tell it like it is. Because if there are no positive things to tell, then what should we do? Should we spread false hope? We can't do that. We have to tell the truth." And on urgency. Quote, "My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Yet I am one of the lucky ones. People are suffering." All right, so that's Greta Thunberg. And I just looked it up, and she's just turned 18, I believe. So she is a woman. She's not a girl. Technically, she's a woman. To get a little background on Greta, in a short amount of time, she's become a really huge force in the fight against climate change, and she first drew international attention when she went on strike from school in protest of how little was being done around the world to combat climate change. She was specifically calling out the Swedish government and decided to protest from August 2018 until September 9th election to raise awareness. And her first demands were for the Swedish government to reduce carbon emissions in accordance with the Paris Agreement. As Thunberg spent days outside of Riksdag, where Sweden's government meets, attention to her plight grew, and she went viral for an impactful TEDx talk in November 2018, which propelled her to international acclaim. And she first learned about the growing problem when she was only 11. She was so overcome with depression as a result that she stopped talking and eating. She was eventually diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and selective mutism, an affliction she says only breaks when she needs to say something important. So let's hear a little bit more about this. So after encouraging her family to reduce their carbon footprint, Thunberg caught the eye of activists with an essay that she wrote on climate change, and that won a competition at a local newspaper, and that led to her protest, which quickly grew from just Sweden to all over Europe. And then, since then, she has been the voice of her generation against climate change. The one who stands to be negatively impacted the most is her generation. So her speeches all showcase this anger that her generation has at politicians and governments that actively block measures to slow down the problem and work against activists. And of course, many of these efforts have gone viral, and here we are. So in some ways, Thunberg has managed to bring more attention to climate change than many other prominent activists, which is amazing and good for her. I know she gets a lot of flack and a lot of pushback and a lot of criticism. But the way I see it, what she's doing is just right. We have to take care of our home, the earth, and that is just a fact. We have to take good care of this earth because we live here. So let's move on to 7 female scientists whose discoveries were credited to men, going on the theme of International Women's Month / Women's Day. I love this article I found, and I just want to read some of the interesting facts to you. So Alice Ball was a chemist. She broke a lot of barriers. She was the first woman and first Black American to obtain both her master's degree and a professorship at the university chemistry department at a university. And so she studied the properties of chalmugra oil, which was promising for treating leprosy at the time, but difficult to use due to its chemical makeup. So Ball developed an injectable form that isolated the active ingredients, rendering a more effective treatment. But she died from an unknown illness before she could publish her findings. So another scientist took credit for her work. And it would take close to 90 years after Ball's death that the University of Hawaii would officially acknowledge her scientific contributions and declare February 29th as Alice Ball Day in Hawaii. That's so great. How sad that she did not get credited, but now she has. So this is just one, apparently, of 7 people who have not been credited properly. Moving on to Marion, an entomologist. So she was from Germany, and she had an unusual interest in insects, even from a young age, specifically butterflies, which were considered an unworthy and repulsive subject to study at that time. So she observed, took copious notes of their life cycle by, direct observation. And despite significant discoveries about metamorphosis, her findings were dismissed by scientists, largely due to the fact that she wrote in German rather than in Latin, which was the designated language of science at that time. So Marion Marion, that's her last name, Marion, also surprised many in the scientific community when in 1699, that is so long ago, she traveled to South America to observe, record, and illustrate insects and plants that had never been seen before. And years later, she would go on to publish Metamorphosis and Sectorum Surinamesium based on her unofficial expedition. Her scientific discoveries and paintings of the natural world would make her one of the leading entomologists and scientific illustrators in her lifetime, and her classifications are still used today. Wow. Okay, moving on to Mary Onning, fossil hunter and paleontologist. She was English. She became a fossil hunter in her youth to help bring an income to her family. And at the age of 12, she discovered fossils off the cliffs of her native Dorset that would change the course of science. She unearthed a fossil of an ichthyosaur. Okay, work with me on this one. Ichthyosaur. Is that right? Ichthyosaur. Why not? And 2 plesiosaur skeletons. And so her observations on these prehistoric animals would change the way scientists approach the origins of natural history. And her work would lay the foundation for Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Because keep in mind, she was many years before that. She was 1799. And I believe Charles Darwin, from having looked it up, did not publish until 1859 his findings about his theory of evolution. So many scientists throughout Europe and America would seek her consultation in matters of prehistoric anatomy, fossils, but because she was female, she was neither allowed to pursue a career in science nor eligible to join the Geological Society of London. Quote, "The world has used me so unkindly, I fear it has made me suspicious of everyone," Onning wrote in a letter. It would take many years after Onning's passing in 1847 that she would be recognized for significant contributions to science. All right. Nettie Maria Stevens, geneticist. She was American, and she devoted her career to studying the life of beetles. In 1905, she observed that male beetles produced 2 types of sperm, one that carried a large chromosome, while the other a small chromosome. When fertilized with a female egg, the large chromosome would produce female offspring, and the small chromosome would produce male offspring. So having noticed these differences, she tried to apply them to humans as well as other animals and developed the concept of XY determination system, which stated that female offspring were determined by 2 large sex chromosomes and male offspring by a large and small sex chromosome. Around this time, fellow geneticist Edmund Beecher Wilson also discovered the same findings in his independent research, but because Stevens was a female, she was discriminated against, and thus Wilson received all the credit. And here we are, 200 years later. How many years later? And we have a whole Women's Month. Look at us go. We went from that to a Women's Month. Wow. So, all right. Henrietta Levitt. She was an astronomist from Massachusetts. She was hired as a, quote, computer, a term used to describe female astronomers employed to analyze data for Harvard College Observatory. Levitt's boss gave her the assignment to measure and record stars whose brightness would turn on and off at specific intervals. And after cataloging 2,400 stars, she discovered the relationship between luminosity and the period of a specific kind of variable stars called the Cepheids. The discovery helped astronomers see the universe in an entirely different way, both by helping measure the distance to other galaxies and understanding the universe's scale. In fact, many years after her death, Edwin Hubble used her discovery to help establish his observations, known as Hubble's law, which states that the universe is continuously expanding. And I think we've all heard the last name Hubble on Hubble telescope, the most famous telescope that everyone knows the name of anyway. So what an incredibly significant contribution this person ultimately had. Henrietta Levitt. Sorry, Henrietta, forgive me. And then we move on to Lise Mightner. She was a nuclear physicist from Vienna. She was the first woman to acquire a professional title in Germany. I don't know if that means any professional title or a nuclear physics professional title, but she dedicated most of her professional career to nuclear physics. And she worked with a small group of scientists who eventually developed nuclear weapons. She was studying nuclear fission, and they were weapons used against Japan during World War II. Scary stuff. And so not only did she have to endure gender discrimination in the workplace, but also the threat of ethnic cleansing. And she lost many prestigious academic positions due to anti-Jew laws enforced by Nazis, and ultimately fled to Sweden for her safety. So, gosh. And I think I have it hard. Wow. You go, Mightner. And although she did receive those many distinguished awards later in her life, she never partook in the Nobel Peace Prize in chemistry because it was given exclusively to her fellow scientist, Hahn, who is credited for having discovered nuclear fission. Many scientists would later cite Mightner's exclusion by the Nobel Committee to be unjust, and I would agree. Wow. Now moving on to our final scientist. Esther Lederberg, microbiologist born in the Bronx. She was never recognized for her contributions to the field of microbiology and genetics. She apparently discovered some stuff I don't know anything about or even how to pronounce. So, lambda-phage replica plating and bacterial fertility factor F. What do those things mean? So, her lack of recognition was especially personal since her first husband, famed molecular biologist Joshua Lederberg, was receiving all the credit for the discoveries that the two made together. And in fact, the couple's research led to Joshua winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1958. Just him alone. Yeah, that's a low bar for marriage right there. That is a low bar. So as a female scientist of the 1950s and 60s, Lederberg was unable to escape the rampant gender discrimination, and it permeated every facet of American society at the time. Some would even argue it still does. I mean, if it doesn't, then why do we have our own month, okay? Why do we have our own month if it doesn't? Moving on. Even in the realm of academia, she still had to fight to obtain a research associate professor position at Stanford. But, meanwhile, this woman is, technically winning Nobel Peace Prizes for her work, and she can't even get an assistant professorship? Amazing. So she was demoted from senior scientist to adjunct professor without tenure. And in contrast, her husband rose up the university ranks and became the chairman of the Department of Genetics. Yay for him. Glitter cannon for him. Wow. So there we have it. Those are some facts. All in the honor of Women's Month, International Women's Month. So I did look it up, and International Women's Day, I believe, was Monday. And then it's Women's History Month, at least in the United States. So happy International Women's Day and happy Women's History Month to all you weirdos.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Podcast Network. This is Weird News, and I'm your host, Moog. Welcome back. We've been talking about Women's History Month. We've been talking about TikToks with fun and weird facts. And I'd like to move on now to, let's see what we're going to do. Roulette. It's a real roulette wheel I'm spinning right now. You can't see it though. So let's move on to Florida Man. We all love Florida Man. Who doesn't love Florida Man? If you don't love Florida Man, you don't love anything. Okay, let's talk about Florida Man. Now, I'm just going to go over some top headlines. Excuse me. Some top Florida Man headlines, because who doesn't love Florida Man, as I said. All right. So, Florida Man. Now, I just found this online. I think at Bored Panda. Okay. Florida Man, charged with assault with a deadly weapon after throwing alligator through Wendy's window drive-thru. And boy, does that check out. That's one of the most Florida things I've ever heard. There's an alligator involved. There's fast food and drive-thru window assault. It just has all of the pieces you would ever need to have the perfect Florida Man saga. What do you think about that? The poor alligator was just a pawn. It, had no motive in the crime, had no say in the crime. I mean, we've been talking about consent, and that really, unless that alligator went up to that man and was like, listen, I got a plan. You, me, and some chicken nuggets. Unless that happened, I'm thinking there was not a lot of consent with that alligator during that plot to take over the world, one Wendy's at a time. All right. Oh, now this one's a nice one. Florida Man steals a car, realizes a baby is in it, not okay, drops baby off safely, and makes his getaway. Oh, Florida Man did one right thing amongst 100 very, very wrong things, living out his Grand Theft Auto dreams. But at least the baby was okay. And I think that even if you accidentally steal a baby, you still stole a baby. And you still go to jail for stealing a baby. Sorry, Florida Man. Babies matter. All right. It's a good one. Florida cop claims Burger King put dirt on his food. But an investigation reveals it was seasoning. And one comment says, I bet this guy is really good at solving crimes. I bet he's not. I bet he's not. So, I love it. I think it's a little bit played out, the whole Florida Man thing, but I just love it. And it never gets old. It never gets old. So, here's another one. Florida Man gets tired of waiting at hospital, steals ambulance, drives home. Yeah, the problem-solving skills in this one are both peak, top-notch, impressive, and bottom of the barrel, the worst problem-solving skills I've ever heard at the same time. Okay. Florida Man tries to rob a GameStop while wearing a transparent bag on his head. And you don't have the benefit of seeing this gorgeous picture of him, but the bag is completely transparent. It's not like a white bag where you can, CVS bag. It is a plastic transparent bag. I bet you he thought like, ooh, because of this plastic filter on my face, those cameras won't be able to pick up my face properly. I bet he assumed some greater technology filter existed, and I don't even know. That just why? Just why? Because you have a few choices. Rob a store and no one can see my face, or rob a store and potentially pass out while robbing the store. Maybe I just said the same thing, but I mean, if you throw a plastic bag on your head, you might not make it out of that store. It's a typical Florida Man moment, and it checks out. It checks out. Thank you, Florida, for bringing us this moment. Oh, and here's a good one. Florida Man breaks into jail to hang out with his friends. Whew. I mean, can you even imagine having so many friends in jail that in order to hang out with your friends, you have to go to jail? I'd like to think that most of us live in the reality where just a very, very small portion of the people we know are incarcerated. And we wait for them to come to us. That's what I'd like to believe, that we wait for our friends to come to us. We wait for our friends to be released. That's what I'd like to believe, but apparently it doesn't work that way for everybody. So, all right, we're going to move on to our final fun Florida man moment. Let's see what we can find. What can we find? I'm going through and I'm kind of deciding which one's the best one for you guys. Okay, now the logic of this one is just super fun. Florida man denies drinking and driving. Says he only swigged bourbon at stop signs. So, if you want to split hairs, he's absolutely right. He was not drinking and driving. He was drinking and stopping, idling, parking, standing. Yeah. So, the letter of the law says no drinking and driving. And this man could probably be a lawyer with the way he did gymnastics and somersaults around the law there, the loophole of the law there, the words. The wording of the law is essentially what I believe lawyers set out to find loopholes around. So then when you're writing legalese, when you're writing the law, you have to be like, let's write this in a way that no lawyer, no defendant, no person can find a way to find a loophole in the wording of this particular law. But this Florida man, he may have just found the loophole because he was not drinking and driving. But I'm sure the language of that law is a lot more specific, so nice try. So that was our little Florida Man series, and just for you guys, just for you weirdos, I'm going to do a special treat for you. I'm going to do a little ASMR cracker eating. Everybody, just put down what you're doing. This is going to be worth it. Let me get a little drink. A little ice. A little ice in a little metal cup. Okay. Now, guys, was that gross or was that fun? Was that fun for you guys? For you weirdos, sorry. I'm only calling you weirdos because we're all here on the Weird News podcast. I think, why are you here unless you're a weirdo? You just want to hear about the weirdos? Well, that's okay. But I'd like to think that, we're all weirdos together on this podcast. That's what I'd like to think. And I think I'm going to stick with that because it just feels right. And we'll be back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Weird News Podcast. I'm your host, Moog. We've been talking about all kinds of weird stuff, from Florida Man to Women's History Month. Now, that's not so weird, but a lot of the facts, are weird. And now we're going to move on to, we're running out of time. It's been a great hour hanging out with all you weirdos, and I just have one final little fun thing we're going to be able to do together today. I'm gonna call it Let Me Google That for you, and we're gonna talk to the Google Home device, and we're gonna ask the Google Home device some fun questions. Let's get us started off with a real generic one. Okay, Google, tell me something weird.
Anne-Marie Sayers is a Mutsun Ohlone leader and the tribal chair of the Indian Canyon Sayers tribe, the Ohlone, were the Native American people of Northern California. She is a trailblazer in her work to preserve indigenous ecological knowledge, indigenous rights, as well as environmental activism.
Okay. I love that she kept on the theme of women's history. Nice job there, Google. They really are listening to us. So, I don't even know if I should ask her to repeat that, but she was talking about a native woman's rights activist. And that was just fun for me, just to ask her what something weird fact she has to tell us. And let's just ask one more before we wrap things up today. Hey, Google, tell me the weirdest thing that's happened lately.
According to Wikipedia, Socotra Island in Yemen is one of the most isolated locations on the planet. Over a third of the island's species can't be found anywhere else on Earth, including the dragon's blood tree, which looks like an upside-down umbrella.
Dragon's blood tree in Yemen. 1/3 of the species cannot be found anywhere else on Earth. That is an interesting, weird fact. Thank you for that, Google. Yeah, I mean, where is Yemen? We could keep asking. I think the let me Google that for you. It should just be a rabbit hole of Google. Hey, Google, where's Yemen?
Yemen is 7,582 miles away.
Oh, okay. Well, that was general. So I'm in Chicago, Illinois. Hello, everybody. And apparently Yemen is 7,000 miles away from here. I could look it up on a map. I mean, I have a general idea of where Yemen is, but not a specific idea. So let's look it up on a map. Come with me on this journey. So Yemen is in the Middle East, right south of Saudi Arabia, west of Oman, and across the Red Sea from Eritrea, Djibouti, in Egypt. It's so funny. We're in our little isolated spots in the world, and I could definitely not show you Yemen on a map if I had to. Which reminds me of the hilarious, was it Miss America answer? Where the woman said, when they asked her, why can't children locate the United States on a map? And her response was, because children don't have maps. I mean, who knows why? But that became a very, very famous viral response. It was just quite over the top with the complete, the complete cluelessness of the woman. And I can't even give her name, and I can't even give the year. But so basically what I'm saying is I'm reminding myself of that moment by looking at this map of Yemen and going, yeah, I could not have told you where that was on a map. It's in the Middle East. We got it. And actually, I think the Middle East is maybe even a little bit further east from what I'm saying, or a little bit further north from what I'm saying. So, all right. So you know what? That has been our show. We've talked about a lot of fun, weird stuff. Thanks for sticking with me through it. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd love to ask you to remember to please subscribe to the show, write a nice review, that really helps us, and also if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a great week.